On his 15th birthday, Ifemide expressed his desire to have his mother's presence as a gift. Wale tried to reassure him that Adunni would be there, but Ifemide insisted that he wanted his birth mother. Once upon a time, there was a man named Wale. Wale was a kind and successful man. He had his own business and he lived in a big, beautiful house. But what made Wale happiest was the love of his life, Yemisi. Yemisi was his girlfriend. She was like a princess. She was very pretty and she had everything she could ever want. Because Wale took care of her so well. Everyone could see how much Wale loved Yemisi, and they were like two peas in a pod. They laughed together, went on their adventures together, and were always there for each other. People would often say, Wale really loved Yemisi, and it was so true. On a fateful day, Wale and Yemisi tied the knot. They got married, and their wedding was the talk of the town. Both families were so happy, and all their friends came to celebrate with them. Yemisi looked like a fairy princess in her beautiful wedding gown, and Wale was the happiest man alive. After the wedding, Wale and Yemisi went on a fantastic honeymoon abroad. Yemisi had never been so excited. She felt like she was living in a dream with Wale by her side. They stayed in a fancy and luxurious hotel, went sightseeing, and made wonderful memories together. When they returned home, they moved into their lovely house. It was a big and cozy house with lots of rooms and furniture. They even had maids and servants to help them with house chores. Yemisi decided she wanted to be a stay-at-home wife. She didn't want to work. She just wanted to focus on starting a family with Wale despite having a degree. Wale offered to open a shop for her, but she politely declined. She was happy just being with Wale and taking care of their home. Wale respected Yemisi's decision and worked even harder to provide for their growing family. He loved seeing Yemisi happy, so he made sure she never had to worry about anything. She could buy whatever she wanted, go to parties, and enjoy her life. People talked about Yemisi's lifestyle, saying she was spoilt and lazy. But Yemisi didn't care. She knew that as long as Wale loved her and approved of her choices, that was all that mattered. Wale's business continued to thrive, and he became even more successful. He was admired by everyone for his hard work and dedication, and through it all, his love for Yemisi only grew stronger. About 5 months after their wedding, Yemisi discovered that she was pregnant. She couldn't believe it. She was going to be a mother, and Wale was going to be a father. Wale was over the moon. He showered Yemisi with even more love and attention, making sure she had everything she needed. Yemisi didn't have to lift a finger. All she had to do was rest and take care of herself. As Yemisi's belly grew, so did her demands. She would say things like, Babe, our baby want this, our baby want that, and Wale would happily give it to her. He wanted his wife, an unborn child, to be happy and very comfortable. Even though Yemisi was pregnant, she still loved attending parties and social events. She would dress up in beautiful clothes and go out with her friends. Wale didn't mind. He wanted Yemisi to enjoy herself before the baby arrived. The day came when Yemisi went into labor. Wale was by her side, holding her hand and encouraging her every step of the way. When their beautiful baby boy was born, Wale felt like the luckiest man alive. He held his son in his arms and felt a love like he had never felt before. They named their son Ifemide, which means my love has come. Wale thought it was the perfect name because it represented the love he had for Yemisi and their new baby boy. As Ifemide grew, Wale was always there for him and Yemisi. He helped with diaper changes, midnight feedings, and soothing the baby when he cried. Wale was a hands-on dad. He loved every moment of it. When Ifemide turned 2 months old, Wale gently suggested to Yemisi that she could start a business if she wanted. He offered to rent a shop for her so she could either sell hair, clothes, bags, or even shoes while still being able to stay at home with their baby. But Yemisi preferred to focus on taking care of Ifemide, and Wale respected her decision. Life was going on smoothly for Wale and Yemisi until one day when Ifemide suddenly developed a very high fever. Yemisi was terrified and she called Wale in a panic. Wale rushed home from work and together they took Ifemide to the hospital. At the hospital, the doctors examined Ifemide and ran some tests. Wale tried to comfort Yemisi, telling her everything would be okay. But deep down, he was worried too. After what felt like hours of waiting, the doctor finally came out with the results. Ifemide had a severe infection that has really affected him, and he needed to stay in the hospital for treatment. Wale's heart sank at the news. Yemisi was beside him with worry, but Wale stayed strong for her. He held her hand and promised that they would get through this together. They spent the next few days at Ifemide's bedside, praying for his speedy recovery. As weeks passed, Ifemide's sickness grew more severe. He became weaker and his fever persisted despite the treatments. Wale and Yemisi spent sleepless nights by his bedside, watching helplessly as their baby struggled. The stress and worry started to take a toll on Wale and Yemisi. They couldn't focus on anything else other than Ifemide's health. Wale's business suffered because he had to take time off to be with his family, and Yemisi couldn't bear to leave Ifemide's side for even a moment. They visited one hospital after another, hoping to find a doctor who could help them. Each visit brought new tests, new medications, and new bills. But despite their efforts, Ifemide's condition didn't improve. They consulted different physicians and ran different tests, yet there was no solution. Wale and Yemisi felt like they were trapped in a nightmare. They spent hours researching online, seeking advice from friends, and praying for a miracle. But as the days went by, their hope dwindled. Yemisi was distraught. She couldn't bear to see her baby suffering, and she blamed herself for not being able to protect him. Wale tried to stay strong for both of them, but inside he was crumbling too. Despite their efforts, Ifemide's condition didn't improve. Wale and Yemisi felt like they were running out of options, and the fear of losing their precious son hung heavy in the air. But they refused to give up hope. They vowed to do whatever it took to save Ifemide, even if it meant sacrificing everything they had. Medical bills started piling up, and Wale realized that their finances were taking a hit. The financial strain became more apparent as they struggled to afford Ifemide's treatment. They had to dip into their savings and cut back on expenses just to keep up with the medical bills. But no matter how much they tried, Ifemide's sickness seemed to have a grip on him that they couldn't shake. Wale and Yemisi felt helpless and overwhelmed, wondering if they would ever find a way to save their precious son's life. As Ifemide's sickness continued, Wale and Yemisi faced even more challenges. Wale had to make a tough decision to try and save his son. He started selling off his properties, things like cars, jewelries and everything they had, just to raise money for Ifemide's treatment. But it wasn't enough. Wale's business suffered because he could no longer focus on it while taking care of Ifemide. He had to let go of his staff because he couldn't afford to pay them their salaries anymore. Wale turned to his friends and family for help, but as time went on, he borrowed more and more money and they started to drift away from him. They couldn't understand why Wale was struggling so much and they didn't want to be dragged down with him. Everything Wale sold was done in distress. Each piece of property he let go of felt like a piece of his heart breaking. Soon, the only thing they had left was the house they lived in. Yemisi was heartbroken. She couldn't keep up her expensive lifestyle anymore, and she started to feel ashamed of herself and her husband, Wale. She missed the days when she could buy whatever she wanted without worrying about the costs. Then one day, Wale told her that they would need to sell their only remaining property, which was the house, and moved somewhere cheaper. Yemisi couldn't believe it. The thought of leaving their precious home, the place where they had built so many memories, was too much for her to bear. That night, while Wale was busy taking care of Ifemide, the unexpected happened. Yemisi packed a bag and ran away, leaving Wale to fend for Ifemide all alone. Wale was devastated. He couldn't understand why Yemisi would leave them when they needed her the most. But he knew he had to stay strong for his son. He had to find a way to keep going no matter what. As days turned into nights, Wale found himself drowning in despair. He called and begged Yemisi not to leave him, but she ignored his pleas. Sometimes she even ignored his calls or kept herself busy, leaving Wale feeling more alone than ever. Wale sent Yemisi messages about how much he needed her, especially with their son being only 10 months old. But Yemisi remained silent, leaving Wale to cry himself to sleep every night. Desperate for answers, Wale tried to contact all of Yemisi's family and relatives. Some ignored him, while others claimed they didn't know where she was. Wale felt so bad. He was hitting a dead end at every turn. Despite his heartache, Wale continued to care for his baby Ifemide. They had moved to a tiny one-room apartment to start their lives over. As Ifemide turned one, Wale saw a glimmer of hope. His son was finally recovering, no longer needing oxygen to breathe. Wale couldn't understand how they had survived such a nightmare, but he was grateful that Ifemide was getting better. One day, the doctor brought them some good news. He informed Wale that Ifemide would soon be discharged from the hospital. Wale's heart swelled with gratitude and relief. After months of suffering, they were finally going to be able to go home together. And about a month later, Ifemide was finally discharged from the hospital. Wale knew he had lost everything, including his wife, but he was grateful that Ifemide had survived. He held his son close as they made their way home, determined to face whatever challenges that lay ahead. That night, as Wale sat alone in their tiny apartment, he thought about how to start their lives over. The weight of their situation threatened to crush him, but the sight of his son sleeping peacefully gave him hope. Wale knew that he needed to find work to support his family, but he worried about leaving Ifemide alone. That was when he decided to call on his younger sister, Aduni, for help. Aduni was very young, but she knew that life had been tough for her older brother, and she decided to come stay with him. Though Aduni was still in secondary school, but she took the responsibility of dropping Ifemide off at preschool before heading to her own school and picking him up afterwards. With Aduni's help, Wale was able to secure a job as an assistant in a firm. It wasn't much compared to what he had before, but it was just a start. Wale knew that he needed to begin small to be able to rebuild their lives brick by brick. As Wale scrolled through his phone one fateful day, he stumbled upon old pictures of Yemisi. His heart sank as he realized that she had created new social media accounts and had relocated abroad. With trembling fingers, Wale tried to send her a message, hoping for some kind of response, but Yemisi remained silent, leaving Wale feeling a mix of sadness and anger. Years passed, and Wale focused on rebuilding his life. He thrived at his job, earning promotions and salary increase along the way. With his newfound success, they were able to move to a better apartment, leaving behind the tiny one-room space they had once called a home. Aduni, Wale's younger sister, gained admission into the university. Wale and Ifemide had grown accustomed to having her around, and they were sad to see her go. But Wale knew education was important, so he supported Aduni financially as she pursued her studies. As Ifemide grew older, he started to ask more questions about his mother. Wale would simply tell him they were separated, never wanting to divulge the painful truth of what had happened years ago. He still defended Yemisi even though she had left them behind. Ifemide's curiosity about his mother only grew stronger as the years went by. He longed to see her and know why she had left. On his 15th birthday, Ifemide expressed his desire to have his mother's presence as a gift. Wale tried to reassure him that Aduni would be there, but Ifemide insisted that he wanted his birth mother. On the day of his birthday, Ifemide couldn't hold back his tears despite the many gifts they had brought for him. He felt the absence of his mother heavily, and no amount of consolation could ease the pain. Wale realized it was time to tell Ifemide the truth about his mother and how he had been unable to reach her since she left. The weight of the story was so much for Wale to bear alone. With a heavy heart, he turned to Aduni for help. Together, they sat down with Ifemide and recounted all that had happened over the years. Ifemide listened in shock and disbelief as the truth unfolded before him. He couldn't understand why his mother had left them, but he admired his father for his bravery and resilience. He thanked Auntie Aduni for standing by them through it all. As Ifemide processed the truth, Wale felt a sense of relief wash over him. He knew it wouldn't be easy for Ifemide to come to terms with everything, but he was grateful to have his sister's support in navigating this difficult conversation. As they hugged each other tightly, Wale hoped that one day Ifemide would find the closure he sought about his mother's absence. Yemisi, once a proud and strong woman, returned home after being divorced because she couldn't have any children for her ex-husband. She was now sick and frail, a mere shadow of her former self, but she heard about how Wale had bounced back from their hardship and how her son Ifemide had grown into a fine young boy. With a heavy heart, Yemisi decided to go back to them. She asked someone who knew Wale for his home and work address. The day she went to their house, there was no one at home and the gateman couldn't allow her in. Undeterred, she decided to visit Wale at his office the next day. Wale was shocked to see Yemisi after all these years. He couldn't believe how much she had changed. Yemisi pleaded with him, but Wale felt no obligation towards her after all they had been through. He asked the security to escort her out. Yemisi begged Wale to allow her to see their son, telling him she was dying. Wale hesitated, but finally agreed, saying he needed to talk to Ifemide first. That night, Wale told Ife about his mother's visit and her request to see him. Ife was reluctant at first, but his father pleaded with him to hear her out. Reluctantly, Ife agreed. Before they could arrange a meeting, Wale heard that Yemisi had been hospitalized with a terminal illness. He took Ifemide to visit her at the hospital. At the hospital, Yemisi apologized to Ife, but he was angry and very hot. He stormed out crying, and Wale ran after him to comfort him. "Daddy, I hate my mother," Ifemide said with a broken heart. His father held him close and took him home. As time passed, Ife struggled to forgive his mother, but with the help of his dad and Auntie Aduni, he eventually found it in his heart to forgive her, though he insisted he didn't want anything to do with her anymore. Meanwhile, Aduni got married to her sweetheart and started a family of her own. Ifemide loved spending time with his cousins and playing with them. Wale worked so hard and regained everything he had lost and even more. After years of suffering, Yemisi's health deteriorated and she passed away. Though their journey was filled with ups and downs, Wale and Ifemide found happiness and peace in each other's love. They were grateful for how far they had come and were hopeful for a better and brighter future. This story teaches us the importance of forgiveness, resilience, and family bonds. Despite facing betrayal and hardship, Wale remained resilient, showing forgiveness towards Yemisi and prioritizing his son's well-being. Through their experiences, we learn to cherish family, stick together through tough times, and find strength in forgiveness. The story emphasizes that love, compassion, and understanding are more valuable than material possession, and that forgiveness can heal wounds and mend broken relationships and bring peace and happiness to our lives. Thanks for watching this captivating story on African stories and folktales. Please don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell for more stories. Thank you.